Welcome back, guys. So, just like I promised, I've watched the entire episode of Joe Rogan with Tim Kennedy. And Tim Kennedy, a former Delta Force operator, an MMA fighter, one of the deadliest men on the planet, probably one of the main people you'd want to have in your team in a zombie apocalypse. And what he did there in that show, putting some sense into the Joe Rogan head, was brilliant. And I think it's a very good video to watch. Now, the video is about 2 hours long almost. And what I did is I watched it all and mushed it up into the relevant parts that I think will be interesting to my viewers. And I'm going to leave it here for you so you can enjoy them. Yeah. So without further ado, let's jump in. Very, very brilliant, interesting podcast.
So, like, did you see the hospital that got destroyed?
That's
Well,
a
it
very
didn't
interesting
really,
one.
right?
No, it did not really.
No, but the New York Times said it did.
Yes,
the
it
New York
did.
Times said it was
And congresswomen.
which is insane, and they didn't retract it. They,
Yeah.
say, they
You
said
take
it was
horse dewormer, and
Yeah.
and Israel destroyed a hospital.
yeah.
So evil.
It's so crazy that they printed that in the New York Times. I mean, that's the paper of record. That's the most important newspaper that we have in America.
There's so many things that the New York Times have said that were clearly found to be wrong. Them and many other mainstream media companies. And now it's just piling. There's so much about this conflict, about many other conflicts around the world. You can see they're very biased towards, very certain agenda that seems to be anti-West, anti-America, jihadist or communist views. But they're not apologizing and they're not being held accountable for it, which is kind of mind-blowing.
In terms of if we wanted an objective source of information, most people say, what's the best? Look, I used to deliver the New York Times when I was a kid. And I did it. It wasn't even that profitable. I delivered the Boston Globe was my main newspaper that I delivered. And then I delivered the Boston Herald as well. And then I got a New York Times route, and I was proud of that because the New York Times was the real newspaper that intelligent people read.
Yeah.
And it was a different plastic wrapper.
Yeah.
You got a
It was like
clear
that's
you
the
got a
good stuff.
clear wrapper for the Herald and a clear wrapper for the Globe, but for the New York Times, I got a blue wrapper. And I was like one of the people that got to deliver the New York Times. And I remember thinking as a 20-year-old kid, like, oh boy, I'm delivering the New York Times. And when I would drop the paper off at these people's houses, like, that's a fucking smart house. Yeah. These people are reading the New York Times in Boston. And I remember thinking that. I was proud of that.
It's funny that he's saying that because I also remember the days where newspapers and the news seemed so much more professional. Maybe we were just naive, and maybe they actually really changed and they moved from being, professional news outlet that is thinking about the news to a propaganda machine that is just trying to be as fast as possible and to compete with TikTok. I don't know.
That I delivered the best newspaper in the world. Really, I literally wasn't that much money, and it was a crazy route because I'd have to go like a mile in between houses. Whereas like with the Boston Globe, I'd have like 5-6 houses on one street that I would drop off papers to. And the New York Times, I'd have this fucking crazy route. I'd have to go all over the place to get rid of 100 newspapers.
Yeah, and then now in 2023, they're circulating terrorist propaganda.
Yeah, and with no
recourse.
no repercussions. And,
Exactly.
And what did they make? Did they even print a retraction? Did they say we fucked up?
You watch a missile get launched from Gaza. You know, 1/3 of all missiles that are launched from Gaza land in Gaza.
I've actually seen that with my own eyes when I was in Gaza. Not once, not twice, like on a daily basis. We'll see these Hamas rockets that they were making. In the beginning, they were really primitive also. They sounded like someone is flying a kite, but going in the air. And then you'll see it flying completely the wrong direction, not towards Israel, just spinning in the air and just landing inside of Gaza. I've seen it. I've seen the explosions. They were literally shooting rockets at their own people. Now it's down to like 28%. Back then it was more. So, during the experimenting time of that resistance that is aimed to save the Gazans from, I don't know who, because Israel, disengaged after left Gaza, they were using their own people as test bunnies. Not on purpose, but the fact was, Mosul was landing in Israel. But you know what? Whenever that happened, they blamed Israel for it. And then the poor Palestinians just had a rocket land in their market. Or I don't know what. They'll be like, shocked. And then Hamas will blame Israel. We'll get more support from its own people. It's very sick. And then we'll, take it on the Israelis. And if anyone was smart enough to look later on, see that doesn't look like Israeli, graded materials, obviously he can't speak. Because if he does, he's done, his family's done. So that's the reality.
Do you know think about how sad that is?
Is that real?
28% of missiles launched from Hamas land on top of the Palestinian people.
Jesus Christ.
And obviously, they have no ability to direct any military target when these crappy missiles are being launched into Israel. They're just like populated area. Populated. I went and did a Fox News stand up in the city directly north of Gaza. That is the most rocketed city in all of Israel. And in like the one day that we were there, we had like 6 rocket attack sirens go off. You know, it's the weirdest thing that the Palestinians are allowing Hamas to literally kill them and pillage everything about their existence from them. Hamas is so rich and so powerful. $70 million from Iran.
That's insane. That is insane, because not only that Israel disengaged from Gaza and Gaza still shooting rockets at Israel and then calling it open air prison when Israel is just not letting them come into Israel and genocide the Israelis. The Gazans are literally allowing Hamas to keep doing that, knowing that Israel is way stronger. So think about that. Let that sink. They know that Israel is capable of, just laying waste to Gaza, and that if they will cross the boundaries, they're going to get a very, very deadly response. And they have no Jews in Gaza anymore to fight. So that's literally their land. Someone gave you a house here. Take a house. Do whatever you want in that house. Use the backyard. It's yours. Build whatever you want. And then you choose to build tunnels, and you choose to start shooting slingshots and rockets at your neighbors, or I don't know what, and try to destroy them, try to climb the fence all the time, to jump into your neighbor's house so you can harm his family, knowing that your neighbor is way stronger than you and have way stronger allies like the US and etc. But you still do that. And then everybody in your house knows that you're doing that, and they seem to be either hijacked and can't say anything, and many of them are actually very okay and supportive. October 7 was solid. They were going in the streets, giving baklawas and knafes, and some of them are singing and glorifying, this is the happiest day of our life that we managed to, do this to the Jews.
Every humanitarian ship that comes into the port, or right now that is being brought up through the Rafah Gate via Egypt into the south portion of Gaza, the moment that lands there, that is taken control of by Hamas. They then build underground infrastructure in the tunnels, and they build military infrastructure, and then they turn as whatever they can into rockets. And the humanitarian aid that is supposed to be distributed to the people, they have control of. Like, they have to go.
Anyone that cares about humanitarian aid and humanitarian work, and actually about human life, and is somehow involved with this conflict in Gaza, and is not outraged that Hamas is still in power, is not outraged that CNN and all these, mainstream media is not covering this enough to bring more attention to that, is just a hypocrite. Is honestly just a hypocrite, because you're having here a whole entire population that was kidnapped by radical, savage, religious fanatics, and they're just abusing their own population, and they're trying to abuse Israel, and they just kidnapped Israelis.
Not the Palestinians. They have been so screwed by Hamas,
but the propaganda
and by the PLO
that they encounter in Palestine has to be insane.
Yeah, they believe that they're on the good side. How do they sift through fact from fiction when what they're being told and being fed is being fed to them by Hamas? Like, how
do they get access to other information?
It's not only getting access to other information. When you look at ancient cultures, there were cultures that had very, very barbaric views about life and death, and also about their enemies or the neighbors, and they literally just wanted to go and annihilate them very dangerously. If religion is not, being checked, calibrated right, it can make the other one looks like an evil, like a less human. And that's the problem in Gaza, that they've been indoctrinating their people for such a long time through very radical religious teachings, that Israelis are evil, that Israelis are kuffar, that God hates the Jews and he wants to punish them. And if you're a good Muslim, then you should want to punish the Jews in the most horrific way. Because remember, the Hamas terrorists who did these things, many of them were kids 15 years ago. Think about that. Many of them were kids 20 years ago, 3 years old, 2 years old. So when they were kids, they didn't want to kill anyone, but now they're the ones who. And if you would have looked at these kids, or you look at a Gazan kid right now, you think like, an innocent kid, such a poor kid. But what about that kid in 15 years from now? He might very likely be the one that will jump over the fence and go and just, massacre an entire Jewish family on a Shabbat in their home, or do way more terrible things that I don't want to say them here, do censorship, but to girls and women. So that was the kids that grew up in Gaza, and these are the same kids that we're seeing now. What make you think they're going to be any different in 20 years from now, if that's the same kid that their parents were and their parents were? Because that is the education this society is going in. In the Western civilization, we don't like to think about it that way, because we like to imagine that everybody have the same values that we're growing on, which is not the truth.
And how do they ever like organize and discuss this openly without fear of losing their lives and being tortured?
The only time that you had consistent water and power going into Gaza was when Israel was controlling Gaza. Now that Hamas is running it, it is nightmarish in there. But they're still in charge. And they're being protected. And here in the United States, being like called freedom fighters. Like, they are barbaric murderers and absolute terrorists that want nothing besides the genocide of when I saw like the LGBTQ flags of LGBTQ stands with Hamas, mind is blown.
Isn't it hilarious that have you ever seen that meme that it says queers for Palestine and then Palestine for queers? Like, yeah.
They wouldn't live there like hours. They'd be pushed off a rooftop or burnt alive. Immediately.
But they don't. But the narrative in this country is not that. Which is so strange.
100%. They were pushed off, roofed off, burned alive. When I went to the UK and I went undercover to one of these pro-Palestine, peaceful, violent demonstrations, what shocked me the most was not what the pro-Palestinians were saying in Arabic. I kind of knew the rhetoric. Was more how many LGBTQ and queers were there from the UK. Clearly not blending in, I mean, they thought they are, but that's like having a bunch of wolves going into a demonstration because they want to cross the fence and kill the sheeps. And then among these wolves, you have a few goats and sheeps walking with them, just are colored and shouting, that the same songs that the wolves are singing. And everybody from the outside is looking, so like, are you guys nuts? You know what will happen to you the moment that you will get what they want? That really surprised me. I mean, I've kept hearing it and seeing these pictures, Queer for Palestine, but I've never seen like a real stand of Queer for Palestine with all of its glory among a pro-Palestinian demonstration that is supporting Hamas. The world that we became, wow.
That like there's sort of overwhelming evidence about the approach that they have to gay people.
Yeah.
But yet, somehow or another, there's this I stand with Palestine thing that makes you a progressive.
Go to Tel Aviv as a gay person. Walk around with your gay pride shirt with your husband or wife of the same sex. Nobody will bat an eye at you. Nobody cares. Everybody's like, what up? Normal. Man, if she and her wife tried to walk down the road in Gaza. Oh, man.
One of the first times that I walked in Tel Aviv, like really walking in Tel Aviv, was with Israeli-American friends of mine. And she's very liberal. And we were walking in Tel Aviv and she wanted me to go to a vegan tofu shawarma place. As we were walking, we went and we tried the shawarma. And then she asked me like, so how is it? How do you like Tel Aviv? And I said, well, I don't like the shawarma too much, but I really like Tel Aviv. And she said, what was your observation about Tel Aviv? And I said, Tel Aviv feels to me like a place where you as a guy can walk with a pink shirt and no one is going to try to hit you. And I said that genuinely because I was having a village mentality, where you're like, if you walk with a pink as a guy with a pink shirt, someone might actually really hit you in the street. And it's just such a backward mentality when you think about the differences between Tel Aviv, let's say, in the progressive areas to, kind of less progressive areas. And that was just a glimpse. So